Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines. Stocks in Asia gained along with US futures early Monday as traders kicked off a busy week for economic data. We're also awaiting a commentary this week from the Federal Reserve Chairman. State Bank of India Chairman Rajnish Kumar calls attention to the subdued credit demand in the country, echoing the demand for economic stimulus. The government plans a debt waiver for small distressed borrowers under the insolvency law. The proposed waiver would be offered as part of fresh start provisions under the IBC. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has approved setting up a high-level committee to review the existing policy framework on military procurement to ensure seamless flow in acquisition and maintenance of assets. And Ujjivan Financial Services has filed a draft red herring prospectus for the listing of its wholly owned small finance bank. That's Ujjivan Small Finance Bank, and it plans to raise 1,200 crore rupees through the IPO. All right, let's talk about the US markets as they ended on Friday. They ended positive, the three benchmarks gaining between 1.2 and 1.7%. But for the week as a whole, it still remained a little weak in that it closed lower for the entire week. Remember, there was a sharp sell-off on Wednesday where the Dow dropped as much as 800 points. We were shut on for a couple of days during that week, so we saw a relatively less impact of the volatility on Wall Street. Let's talk a little bit more about everything that's going on in terms of the trade talks between the US and China. US President Donald Trump said the US is, in his words, doing very well with China and talking, but he suggested that he wasn't ready to sign a trade deal just yet. And this is hours after top economic advisor Larry Kudlow laid out a potential timeline for the resumption of substantive discussions with Beijing. Ross Cranzi of Bloomberg News gets you the latest in this report.
An interesting comment from Larry Kudlow, Paul, just saying that the talks that we've had this past week by telephone have been more positive than has been reported or has been kind of indicated by each side. So he suggests there's something going on there and talked basically about a timeline with more talks in the next week to 10 days and potentially the face-to-face talks that have been scheduled for September but really haven't been confirmed. So he sounded pretty optimistic. President Donald Trump said in a tweet that the US and China have been talking. He didn't provide any more details, and he muddied the waters a little bit in his comments leaving New Jersey this afternoon, just about, I don't want to do a trade deal with China yet, and China needs to do a deal more than the US. So there's certainly nothing terribly clear coming out of the White House, but I think after the day's kind of comments are sifted through, I think it's probably net positive. President Trump, was pumped up about the U.S. economy and what he sees as its relative strength. But I think his advisors would certainly be telling him that if the Chinese economy is weak and other economies are weak, the U.S. can't be totally inoculated from that. And so that would be some kind of impetus toward keeping these trade talks going.
And Ross, we have had so many different headlines when it comes to the China-U.S. trade talks, not to mention fear of recession with the yield curve inverting last week, that I think the comments that the president has made on Europe have been overlooked. President Trump just does not seem to be happy with how trade relations with Europe are progressing.
No, that's absolutely right. And he talked about that in a rally in New Hampshire on Thursday night. And it's possible that he's being animated, too, by some new figures on the EU's rising trade surplus with the U.S. It's up 11% in the first half of 2019 from a year ago, and Germany has the biggest trade surplus of all. So President Trump has often talked about that metric, and there's no doubt he's not happy with it. Probably no decision on auto imports, which is a very big thing with President Trump, until mid-November. That's a deadline that he has as to whether or not to levy tariffs on auto imports, which would be a big hit to Germany. But that's certainly something in the background. Coming up more quickly is the G7 leaders meeting in France at the end of this week. And President Trump has mused kind of publicly and privately about taking some action against France, possibly against French wines, because of Emmanuel Macron's tax on U.S. technology companies. So it's possible that we'll see something about that even in the next few days before President Trump leaves for France. So watch this space because Tariff Man probably isn't finished yet.
All right. On that note, let's take a check of how the Asian markets are trading this morning. I'm joined by Sophie Kamruddin, who's live from the Bloomberg studios in Hong Kong. Good morning, Sophie. I see green across the board as of now. What's the trend indicating for you?
Yeah, this Monday morning is looking like a risk-on mood for Asian stocks amid speculation that policymakers will bolster fiscal stimulus to counter growth fears. So some green shoots across the region then after the regional index capped a fourth weekly loss on Friday. And over in the bond space, that rally is taking a breather. Long-end treasuries are under pressure with 30-year yields higher by nearly 5 basis points this morning as the curve bear steepens. And Chinese bond markets, they will be in focus, with the PBOC set to revamp its interest rate system by introducing a new loan prime rate to lower borrowing costs this month. And from then, it will announce that new LPR every 20th of the month. And at the start of cash trade, checking in on Chinese stocks, they are gaining ground with the Shanghai Composite set for a fourth day of gains, while the Hang Seng is on the up, adding 1.5%, as some investors reckon that the market has largely priced in negatives from the protests in Hong Kong as the city capped an 11th straight weekend of unrest in Hong Kong. Now, elsewhere, the yen is holding a 2-day drop, while Japanese stocks are set for a second day of gains, with electronics and banks boosting the topics, shaking off then that drop that we saw in exports for Japan for the month of July, which came in at a more moderate contraction than anticipated at 1.6% when it came to that decline. Back to you.
So much for that. Well, let's have a look at how the Indian markets are faring right now. Agam Vakil is here to tell you all about the day's trade and also what's happening in the futures and options space. Good morning, Agam. How's it looking in the start of the week?
Good morning, Alex. So as you've already noticed, Asia is looking up, and that's likely to have a positive bearing on Indian markets as well. So for now, we're looking at the SGX Nifty indicating a positive start. And based on that, let's also take a look at how we've seen markets fare last week and Friday. Some advances coming through. The broader market indices like the mid-cap and the small-cap indices looking at further gains, as was the case for the banking indices, which were also up and about, specifically the Nifty PSU banking index, which did advance by around 1.5%. Moving on and talking about the ADRs for now, well, looking green for Tata Motors, Vedanta, ICICI Bank. So certainly some steady gains coming in there, as was the case for something like a Dr. Reddy's as well. So all of them are advancing for now. Strong buying coming through from the FIIs table. Again, 1,300 crores odd worth of buying as far as FIIs are concerned. DI is buying stock worth around 1,058 crores too. So there's been a little bit of a reversal, but we must remember that a lot of this has to do with bulk deals that have happened over the course of the past couple of days. It was flattish, of course, but we did see gains from ITC, Axis Bank and Maruti Suzuki being cancelled out by TCS, Reliance Industries and HDFC Limited. Moving on, what can we expect based on the cues that we've seen in futures and options last week? So we did see longs in the Nifty futures and the Nifty banking futures. Also, well, a little bit of a trickle up, but the key feature here was that we saw a strong build up towards longs in the Nifty futures. For now, a little more writing around the 10,900 and 11,000 puts as well. So we keep an eye on that one. In terms of change in open interest, again, it was very much those puts which saw writing. So of course, it's a positive. And as far as your VIX is concerned, it did rise by around 2%, but the move wasn't as stark as what we have been used to of late. Of course, the Nifty put call ratio also largely is around the same lines of around 1.2. Diwan Housing Finance continues to remain in the F&O band, so there will be restricted trade here. And besides that, Apollo Hospitals is something I'm keeping an eye on because we saw a sharp 8% up move. Keeping an eye there, Apollo Tires, on the other hand, marginal up move, but Glenmark Pharma was under pressure. And on the losing end, as in the declines in open interest, we had Torrent Pharma, UPL, and Just Dial. So a lot of stocks are there which we can keep an eye on, Alex. But once again, while it may be a very mixed day of trade when it comes to the broader markets, well, the indices may very well advance based on the cues that we're getting in, at least in the first half of the session.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Agam. Let's take a look at what else is making headlines across the globe. Sue Keenan of Bloomberg News brings you the first word headlines.
Let's start with Argentina, which has been downgraded deeper into junk as markets brace for a potential default. This after President Macri was soundly beaten in a primary election. Fitch cut the long-term issuer rating by 3 notches to CCC, putting Argentina on par with Zambia and the Congo. The S&P lowered its sovereign rating to B- from B and added a negative outlook. The last 7 days have seen the peso fall to a record low. Gibraltar has rejected a U.S. request to hold an Iranian oil tanker, and the vessel has now left port. The Grace 1 was detained early last month on suspicion of smuggling fuel to Syria. Iran denies that, but has not disclosed the ship's intended destination. Gibraltar's move saw Iran seize a UK-flagged tanker in the Gulf, further raising tensions between Tehran and the West. To the UK now, leaked government documents suggest the UK will face food, fuel, and medicine shortages after a no-deal Brexit, this along with job losses and disruption at Channel ports. The Sunday Times says the government's Operation Yellowhammer file warns of restricted supplies of fresh food and interruptions of the supply chain. Government ministers say the document was only setting out the worst-case scenario. To India now, the country is reported to be easing the lockdown in Kashmir with a curfew partially lifted and communication links restored. Landline and low-speed mobile phone services have resumed, and schools and local government offices will reopen later Monday. Now, the UN Security Council discussed the disputed region for the first time since 1965. However, it failed to produce a united statement. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sue Keenan. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Mishika Parak is joining in to tell you all about the stocks in news. Good morning, Mishika. What's on your list today?
Good morning, Alex. First on my list is Ujjivan Financial. Ujjivan Small Finance Bank filed its draft red herring prospectus with SEBI for the proposed 1,200 crore IPO. Nomura says that separate listing would lead to a 50% holding company discount. Also, Nomura arrives at a 37 to 39 rupees per share fair value for the bank if it's listed. Coffee Day Enterprises says that total debt of the group stands at 4,970 crore rupees. The debt of the group will be reduced by 2,400 crores post the Global Village Tech Park deal. The company is expected to have a comfortable position to service the reduced debt obligations. Then we have Sun Pharma. The company has entered into a licensing agreement with China Medical System to commercialize 7 generic products in China. Dvs Motors plans to invest $3.2 million in US-based Predictronics Corporation. The acquired company specializes in providing end-to-end predictive maintenance analytics solutions. Then we have Jammu and Kashmir Bank. Anti-Corruption Bureau registered a fresh case in the loan fraud worth over 350 crore rupees. Dvs Housing Finance is not in a position to release quarterly results in time due to engagement of accounts and finance teams in various non-routine audits. Lastly, we have Kritan Infra. Its arm has secured orders worth 145 crore rupees for various works at the Hyderabad International Airport.
Thanks so much for that, Mishika. Now, Michel Gentile is the owner of a bookstore in Pola, Italy, with a population of just over 5,000 people. And yet he has started an initiative that is resonating all over Italy. In his bookshop, children can exchange a plastic bottle and a tin can for a brand new book. The idea was to tackle 2 big issues at the same time: getting children to read more and teaching them how to take better care of the environment. And the initiative seems to be working. Take a look.
Cambio di una bottiglia di plastica e una lattina ricevo un libro gratis, diciamo.
Scegliete il libro, eccoli qua.
È un'iniziativa per me molto bella. Possiamo salvare il mondo e in cambio riceviamo appunto un libro che aumenta il nostro sapere.
È un'iniziativa che mette insieme il dramma dei rifiuti e il problema della lettura. Quindi ho cercato di abbinare questi due problemi e riunirli sotto questa forma simbolica per dare un senso e spingere al riciclo e alla lettura. Quando tu gli offri un libro io vedo una gioia.
Sono venuto qua perché non voglio che il mondo deve essere inquinato e quindi ho portato lattine e bottiglie di plastica.
Cominciano a capire le nuove generazioni e dovranno capirlo sempre di più, altrimenti non avremo speranze, che gli oggetti non si buttano, gli oggetti si riusano.
Con le piccole cose, con i semplici gesti piccoli, non le grandi idee, ognuno di noi può fare qualcosa e deve fare qualcosa per il pianeta.
All right, let's take you through some of the other stories you'll find on the website bloombergquint.com if you look at it right now. First up, tens of thousands of protesters in Hong Kong defied heavy rain and marched on an 11th straight weekend as more moderate leaders sought to reset the pro-democracy movement after violent scenes at the airport last week threatened to sap support among the broader public. Adding to this, it seems a global movement has started for Hong Kong as well, with protests erupting in other countries like Australia as well. In a move that will benefit startups, the government has relaxed norms for shares with differential voting rights that will help such companies retain control while raising equity capital. With the amended rules, companies can now have up to 74% differential voting rights shares of the total post-issue paid-up share capital, up from the earlier limit of 26%. And the government plans to give a debt waiver to small distressed borrowers under the insolvency law framework. Corporate Affairs Secretary Injati Srinivas said that discussions have been held with the microfinance industry regarding the criteria for the proposed waiver for small distressed borrowers from the economically weaker section. That's all you need to know going into trade today. Do stay tuned. There's a lot more coming up in just a short while. This is Bloomberg Quint.